too slow, but you feel like home. Yeah, you feel like home. And where you run, I will follow, 'cause you feel like home.
Hi everyone, my name is Lucy Moore, and as Chair of Right by the Sea, I want to welcome you to our 5th Right by the Sea Festival, coming to you from beautiful Kilmore Quay, County Wexford. We are delighted to be able to present an exciting programme to you, especially after the last 18 months of unprecedented challenges. Right by the Sea 2021 is the result of hard work on the part of our volunteers, plus support from our sponsors. And I want to thank especially the Arts Council of Ireland, RTE Supporting the Arts, Wexford County Council, and all our local sponsors. We sincerely hope you enjoy this event. And if you've a taste for more, please go to www.rightbythesea.ie to book other events during the festival or events that we run throughout the year. Now, I invite you to enjoy what's coming up. And I want to say thanks to you for joining us. See you all soon again.
Indeed, I'm Serena Caulfield. I'm a painter based around Kilmore in Ballyhealy. And my connection to Right by the Sea is that I exhibited there in 2017. I'll start with my artwork. I'm based in Ballyhealy, and a lot of it draws on kind of local mythology and stories based around my house, and I paint, mostly paint, bit of drawing and things as well. Recently I've been just shortlisted for the Zurich Portrait Prize, which is a massive achievement. So my work will be, it's a portrait of my dad. It'll be hanging in the National Gallery from November the 13th.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this special event of the 5th Right by the Sea Literary Festival. I'm Jean Cullinan, one of the Right by the Sea crew, and it's a tremendous pleasure to be in the company of local writer Carmel Harrington and Esther Hayden, commissioning editor with the People newspapers, as they talk about location and character in Carmel's very appropriately named book, The Moon Over Kilmore Quay. So USA Today bestseller Carmel Harrington lives in Wexford with her husband Roger, children Amelia and Nate, and rescue dog George Bailey. Her 9th novel, The Moon Over Kilmore Quay, became an instant bestseller in Ireland and the USA. Other best-selling novels include My Pear-Shaped Life, 1,000 Roads Home, The Woman at 72 Derry Lane, and the ITV commissioned novel Cold Feet, The Lost Years. Carmel's trademark is to write warm, uplifting stories with humour, heart and hope. She loves to write about family, friendships, love and life within complex, twisting plots. Carmel's novels have been shortlisted twice for an Irish Book Award, and her debut, Beyond Grace's Rainbow, won Kindle Book of the Year and Romantic eBook of the Year 2013. Carmel is also a regular on Irish TV screens as panellist on Elaine, and she's the co-founder of the Inspiration Project, a coaching and writing retreat. Esther Hayden is commissioning editor with People newspapers, part of Media House Ireland. She's responsible for editing the Wicklow People and Bray People, which are weekly local newspapers. She lives in Great-Namana, County Kilkenny, with her partner, Fiacre. So sit back, relax, and enjoy the conversation.
Thanks, Jean. Hi, Carmel, how are you?
I'm really good. Thank you, Jean, for the lovely introduction, and it's lovely to be here.
It's strange times when you're doing these things on Zoom now. I suppose, how did you find, say, writing and promoting a book during COVID, before we start talking about the book itself? That must have been quite difficult.
oh, Esther, wasn't it? It was an absolute mad time, I think, no matter what industry or what career you're in, or whether you're, stay-at-home mom or dad or whatever. It was just a really weird time. I work from home anyhow, so that part didn't change. Because that, I'm here every day, most days anyhow. But the difference was that I wasn't here on my own. All of a sudden I had kids at home and I was homeschooling, and my husband began to work at home too. So the house became very busy. And actually my office is off the kind of main kitchen family room. I changed the sunroom, which is where I am now, into an office about 4 or 5 years ago. And it works beautifully when the house is empty. But I realised when the house is busy, the kitchen is the heart of the home. Everybody,
yes, of course.
Yeah, so people are in and out the whole time, making coffee or juice or whatever. So, we had to really get a new rhythm in the house so that I could keep writing every day. And we all had to find our new space within the house and be kind of conscious of each other's changing needs. But I don't know how we did it, but we managed to get there somehow or other. It was a bit crazy at times.
I think that's everyone's kind of overriding feeling for the last 18 months. I don't know how we did it, but we did it, and it worked out. Yeah. I suppose the moon over Kilmore Quay, it has a particular, I suppose, because of the association with Wexford, but obviously you, but I think location-wise, it really resonates with people because it's very much Kilmore Quay. And I was just wondering, why did you choose to set the book in Kilmore Quay as opposed to another area in Wexford or indeed Ireland?
It was always going to be somewhere in Wexford because the story, like one of the central themes is around immigration and about that pull to home. So those Irish immigrants who've left, and, the fact that you always think of Ireland as home no matter where you live. And that was kind of my experience as well growing up. So I knew it had to be Wexford, but where in Wexford was the question. And just Kilmore Quay is just a place that's very special to me and Roger and the kids. And we would often just spin down on a Friday after school or after work to the salty chipper and get fish and chips and eat them on the quay there. And anyone with young kids will know that it's a great playground there as well, right? And so, of course, it would give myself and Rog a chance to just sit down on the bench and watch the salty islands in the background while the kids played on the roundabouts and swings. And just really a lovely place. And we've spent a lot of time there. And it's so picturesque. I thought if I wanted to describe somewhere in Ireland that people really did have this conflict about where home is between their head and their heart. And I thought, well, Kilmore Quay kind of really works. And also the other reason for it was that the book is set in two timelines, in the 90s, the early 90s, and then, of course, in the now. And I love the fact that Kilmore Quay is much unchanged, at least on the surface. Of course, things changed. But, when I went to Kilmore, as a kid, it was the same beautiful cottages, the same beautiful, yellow thatched roofs. And that the views haven't really changed. And I like that. I like the fact that it was the same place really for my characters in the 90s as it was for now. So that's why Kilmore Quay.
Okay. And with a big recurrent themes, I've found myself, the three recurrent themes were immigration, friendship and family, and the relationships between those separately and also together. Had you got an idea in mind before you chose Kilmore, or did the idea evolve because you chose Kilmore?
No, the kind of the idea was to write about something around immigration. I knew I wanted to do that. And then it was kind of a case of where the locations were. Because I'm the daughter of immigrants, right? My dad, my grandmother left Ireland. She was the first to leave Wexford.
Okay.
My grandfather died when she was she was left a very young widow with two small children. And things were just really, really tough. And she had to go to London for work and send money home. My dad and my aunt stayed behind with an aunt and uncle here in Wexford. But as soon as they were old enough, they followed her on the boat and they went over to England and they moved in with her. And so Daddy, he first moved over when he was 15. He was a young buck, and as he said himself, he was wild out. But what he did was he worked lots of jobs, but apart from that, he threw himself into the Irish community in London. And he joined the London Irish Centre, and he used to go to all of the Cayleys over there and the Feshes, and he played hurling with the Father Murphys. Anyone who's ever lived in London, Irish living in London, will know them. They're a very well-known hurling team. And it was kind of a lifeline for him. It was his connection to Ireland. And while he was there, he met actually the son of Irish immigrants and became really good friends with them. And they invited him around for dinner. And they happened to live next door to my mother, who was this pretty Londoner. And that's how my dad met my mum. So they met over a garden fence and started to date and got married very young. And then the four of us came along. My two sisters and my brother came along fairly quickly, and myself. And do you know what? Like growing up, Esther, Daddy always referred to Wexford as home. And it was home. It wasn't where we lived in London. It was home. We'd get the ferry from Fishguard to Rosslare for our summer holidays every year. And we'd go down to Kirklow Beach and eat sandy ham sandwiches and warm red lemonade. And Daddy would catch up with all the cousins. And it just had such a great memories. But I think it was always a case of it wasn't if we were going to move home, it was when. And then one day when I was 10, we moved home. And so for me, that story of immigration, it was a very personal one for me. And it was one that I had always kind of felt like I would explore at some point in the future. But I wasn't sure when or what story would work for it. And then it came to me when I got the idea for this novel. I knew that I wanted to write about the daughter of Irish immigrants. And so B. O'Connor, she kind of came to light. And I gave her actually a family name. I think I'd said this to you a while ago, that Beatrice is a name that's in our family and also my husband's family. So I thought that was a good name. And I decided to write about the daughter of immigrants. And initially I was going to set her and her story. She was going to be set and living in London, much like myself. And she was going to have all of my experiences as the daughter of an Irish immigrant. But then for purposes of the story, which I don't really want to give away spoilers, but I really didn't want her to have ever been to Ireland before. And I just thought that didn't make sense. If she was only living in London on a hen night, sure, she could have been over. Do you know what I mean?
Absolutely, yeah.
So
it wouldn't make sense.
It wouldn't make sense. So I figured I kind of needed to send her further afield. So I came across the idea of New York. And the reason for New York for that was that going back to my first novel, Beyond Grace's Rainbow, I did a little book tour when that came out in America. And I spent St. Patrick's Day in New York. And I ended up being asked by the Wexford Association of New York to march in the St. Patrick's Day parade. Like, honest to goodness, Esther, it was like the best thing ever. I got to wear my purple and gold sash, carry the flag up front and march down Fifth Avenue. And it was just so much crack and it was wonderful. But I met all these Irish immigrants, both first and second generation Irish immigrants. And I just was struck when I met them that when they spoke about home, they had the same look on their face that my dad used to have when I was a kid. I just saw it. It was like this memory was just switched on. And so when I was trying to think about location, I thought, it has to be New York. Like, it just felt like it was the right place. And that's why the locations were New York and Kilmore Quay.
And actually you got to kind of weave your story about your experiences in the parade into the book as well. Well, obviously not with you. You were able to weave that in as well, which I presume was kind of on a personal basis
Very much so. Everything that scene that happens in New York on St. Patrick's Day was very much my own experiences, down to, like, I can remember my husband and I, we had been given a spot to meet, and we were on our way to that spot, and everywhere was a sea of green. I just could not get over how many people were wearing green, everybody, and they had their face painted, and it's such a big deal over in New York. Like, they really do celebrate St. Patrick's Day, and it was really quite wonderful, actually. Yeah, it was great. It was great fun, really great fun.
I suppose we don't celebrate our Irishness enough here, in the sense that it's so commonplace to us that you become a bit blasé, I suppose. But if you're away from home, it really just makes it so much more special to be able to celebrate St. Patrick's Day with people from, even if you don't know them, but people from home, and to make new friends. Sorry.
Yeah, well, exactly what you said, actually, Esther, because they all knew each other, and they were telling. So as I was chatting to them on that day, and marching, it was oh my goodness, the cold. It was so cold, but we were marching along, and of course it went on for hours, because you'd march. You don't see this when you watch it on the news, and you see them. You march for a bit, and then you stop. Then you march for a bit, and you stop. So it's very stop-start. So we had done that, and like we were just chatting away, and I realised as I watched. because I'm a great people watcher. I love to people watch. And as I watched them, you know, they knew each other, and they'd obviously, you know, they'd meet up maybe only every year at the St. Patrick's Day parade, but all their kids were there and they were growing up. And it was just this lovely, it was really lovely, actually, this little community, very much a strong community over there.
And I suppose friendship was another one that I really, and I think the book really resonated with me on that level, for there was the two sets of three friendships, two sets of the girls, the trios. And I think it's very much reminiscent of my own situation. And I think that it's a book in that level that even if you had no experience of immigration, the friendship element of it, like, I mean, everyone has someone, like I think I said before, that you can call when you have a body to bury, and they'll just come with all guns blazing, you know. And I think that was it a conscious decision to make two sets of three?
Yeah, I don't know why I like the number 3, but I do. And I just think it worked well. And it was, I deliberately had parallels between the 1990s, and the story in the 1990s is Lucy Myrna's story, who leaves Kilmore Quay to start a new life in America, in Brooklyn. And then it's the story of B. O'Connor decades later in the now, in 2020, as she tries to kind of retrace her Irish heritage. And both have these wonderful friendships. And for Lucy's case in the 1990s, she shares a house with her sister Maeve and their best friend Michelle, and they call themselves the Three Amigos. And they drink a lot of Blue Nun, leaf from milch wine, and, eat a lot of pot noodles and stuff like that. And they share a house up in Dublin together. And a lot of my own experiences, because I left Wexford in the early 90s and shared houses with girls and drank a lot of cheap German wine, and the crack was mighty. And so I kind of, I gave them a lot of the fun and that lovely, when you first leave home, I'm sure you've been through it, but when you leave home, those friends become your family. And, there's just something so amazing. Like, they're the ones that you see more than anyone else. And when I left Wexford, when I was 18 for Dublin, I'd never lived away from home. And it was just it was such a different world for me. I lived quite rurally here in Wexford, and it was a completely new world, and I knew nobody. So yeah, it was, I really love to explore that. And then the friendships in the now, we have B. O'Connor, who's from Brooklyn, born and reared. Her grandparents were Irish, actually, and her dad is first generation. She's second generation Irish. But her two best friends are Katrina, who's a Serbian kind of firecracker, really, and Stephanie, who's the daughter of English immigrants. So they share the fact that the three of them are immigrants living in Brooklyn. And I think that's not unusual. And it was great fun to write about their friendship too, from school all the way up. So yeah, it was lovely. I really did kind of love that theme of friendship, and it's one that's very important to me. I mean, I have got through the worst and the best of times with my friends by my side, and you made me giggle when you were talking about like who'd bury a body for you, because that's the thing. I always say that there are only a few people that if the phone rings at 3 a.m, you answer it to, and they say there's a dead body, and you just say,
yeah,
I'll take a shovel, and you're gone.
Yeah.
There's not many people you do that for, no questions.
No, very few, but and I have found generally that they are ones that you have made from a young age and have literally brought through with life with you, and they know everything about you and you know about them, and you don't even have to talk sometimes for days on end, and still it's just there is the 3 o'clock text or 3 o'clock in the morning text or phone call, and it's like, I'll have to get this, because it's either gossip or it's an SOS or it's something. So I think that they're important.
Absolutely. And what I wanted to do was like in the story in the now with B and Stephanie and Katrina, and actually as the story opens, as the book opens, their relationship is quite fractured, and Stephanie has disappeared and isn't really in B and Katrina's life. But again, like with good friends, you don't leave that go. Do you know what I mean? And that sometimes things happen and friendships kind of splinter, but those really good ones, they survive that, and they survive everything, and they can people find their way back to each other. And I kind of think of friendships a bit like stars, the way that you don't always see a star, but you know that they're there, and it's like that.
Yes.
And when you need them, they shine brighter for you to show you your way home. And I think that's what these friends do in the book, that they shine brightly for each other at times. And that's the case both in the then and the now.
Yeah, definitely. And I think especially in the now, that while Bea had no sisters, the girls are de facto sisters for her.
They are, totally. Yeah, they do. And I mean, they're right by her side. Again, be careful with those spoilers, but
yes,
for anyone who's read the book, they will know. I mean, there's a scene in it, and if I say it kind of out of context, I don't think it'll ruin it, but there's a scene about scones in it. And it was just a lovely scene to write, because Bea is just having a really, really, really tough time, and she's really upset, and she's thinking about her grandmother who pretty much raised her, because there's no spoiler in this. Her mother dies when Bea is quite young, so she never knew her mother. So her grandmother has died, and we know that early on in the book too, no spoilers. But she's thinking about these scones that her grandmother used to make, and she is just upset that she never took the time to learn how to make them herself. And she's thinking about this legacy of her grandmother's that she has somehow let slide. And so the two girls who are her best friends, this Serbian Katrina and English Stephanie, and the two of them are there, and they're like, we'll make scones with you. And they are literally drying her tears and telling her that, yeah, let's all make scones together. And it's just this lovely scene. And there's a lot more to it than that. I have to be careful what I say, but some of the smaller moments like that were, I think, where the real beauty of friendship comes in, that for the big moments and those small moments, good friends will always be and have your side, and they'll just step up and make scones with you when you need to make scones, and that's it.
Yeah. And I thought that, speaking of that scene, like, I thought it was lovely that they've all had their childhood memories of Bea's grandmother making those scones and eating the scones, and like, it was a real shared experience as well for them, and you know, something so random, and it's stuck in their memories of them all growing up.
Well, that's it. And actually it was kind of inspired as well, because as part of writing this book, I always do a lot of research for all my stories. So whenever I write a new book and I come up with an idea, what do I know about it myself? And I start reading books, or, you know, watching maybe documentaries, but I try and learn as much as I can. And then I quite often have to do interviews and do some real in-depth research. So for this, when I decided to set it in New York, now I know people are going to laugh and say, yeah, right, you just wanted a trip to New York. But what I decided to do was I wanted to interview Irish Americans and really see what it was like. Because I knew what it was like to be the daughter of an Irish man living in London and the daughter of an English woman living in Ireland, actually, because the reverse happened when my mother came home to Ireland with my dad.
Of course.
He was the immigrant then, at a tough time as well, because it was the 80s and all of the background of the Guildford Four and the Birmingham Six and the trouble. So being English in Ireland wasn't fun. Like, it was truly.
Yes.
But anyhow, back to the story. I wanted to kind of do a bit of research. So I went over to New York and spent a week in the Irish communities of Queens and Brooklyn and interviewed lots of people, first and second and third generation Irish. And there was just every single one of them. There were so many things that they all shared. But one of the things that struck me that I absolutely loved, Esther, was the fact that they all paid it forward in some way. They all had a scone story.
Okay.
Why somebody helped them out when they first arrived from Ireland off the boat or off the plane in later years. And there was always someone who gave them a dig out. And so in the book, it's only a little tiny mention, but Katrina remembers when it comes to those scones. There's a lot more to this book than scones. I feel like we're doing. I promise anyone who's watching this. But when Katrina is talking to Bea, and she said, well, you know, when we arrived in, she as a kids, they lived.
Yes.
And when we arrived, when our family moved in next door to your family, your grandmother came to visit us with a Tupperware tin full of scones. And that night we had nothing else, but we had scones as we sat amongst all the boxes in our new house. And we've never forgotten that lovely token of friendship that your grandmother offered us. And but that was very much based on the idea that I got during the interviews, that everybody had a story, that, you know, I arrived in New York and this happened and somebody helped me out, or somebody, you know, there's a real friendship and pay it forward community within the Irish communities over there. It's lovely.
Yeah. And that was, I thought as well, it was particularly because they weren't Irish, they were Serbian, you know what I mean? So it wasn't a matter of just sticking within their own community and paying it forward there. It was to everyone, to all immigrants and to all people into the neighbourhood that they were willing to welcome, even though the Grand didn't approve of the outfit that Katrina was wearing at the time. And, you know, I suppose she probably looked at it and said, maybe this is going to be a bad influence, but, you know, she just went with it and rolled with it.
Absolutely. And you know, and some of the stories actually from those interviews ended up in the book as well. There were a couple, again, they won't ruin the story, but I met this gorgeous Irish. Well, actually, she's born and reared in America, like B, actually, as her name is Stacey. I met her and I interviewed her, and she was telling me the story of her parents, how they met. Her dad is from Ireland. And she was also telling me the story, which ended up in the book. It was so lovely. He was driving a bus. And back then, in kind of the 50s and 60s, when you were driving a bus, it's a little bit different now in New York, but the driver would say, next stop, Times Square, next stop, whatever. And he was sitting on the bus, driving the bus, and he spied in the mirror, and somebody had got on that he hadn't noticed when he got on, but a guy from Tecumseh in Wexford had gone on and was sitting green off the boat in the back of the bus, looking very worried and nervous. And so her dad just said, next stop, Tecumseh. And the guy was like, what? You know, so I just thought that story was so lovely. So I had to really, and even when I put it in, my editor was saying, I think we can cut this scene. It doesn't really move the story forward. And I said, no, I want to leave it in because I just wanted to kind of honour Stacey's family, because I thought it was such a gorgeous story. And yes, it didn't really need to be where it was, but it really did happen. And it was just too nice not to include. So it was lovely.
Yeah, no, I didn't realise that was based on a real life story. It was a nice touch. I just thought it was and it was a moment of humour as well. And how people are trying to welcome people and make them feel at home when they can tell that they're straight off the boat as well. And was it a definite decision on your part to make Dan from Wexford as well? Or you definitely wanted to root it in Wexford? Yeah,
I decided just to go. You know, and I kind of did check myself, and I did say, look, are we all going to be from Wexford? We're not all from Wexford. But then when I thought about it, I was kind of going that really, when I look at all my dad's friends that he had in London and the community, they were all Wexford people. Like, do you know what I mean? That you do tend to stick within your own kind of area of group. And so he just, you know, all of his friends, and they were all uncles to us. Like, we had so many uncles, but they were all, the only thing they were really was they were from Wexford, and they played hurling with my dad, and, you know, or went for a pint with him after work, or worked with him on the building sites or whatever. So, so in my head, I just kind of thought, no, do you know what I mean? It's, yes, okay, maybe it was a slight coincidence really that there was someone else from Wexford, but I just like that. And for B, so Dan is the love interest for anyone watching that hasn't read, but Dan is the love interest for B. And she meets him, as all good relationships are met, in a bar, in a nightclub, and she meets him on New Year's Eve. And when she's chatting to him, she realises that he's from Wexford. And her mother was from Wexford. And of course, when he tells her he's from Wexford too, this connection is something that pulls them together. And I think that worked well too, because B is so curious about her mother and everything about her life, because she never knew her. And so, of course, any connection to that, you know, she says herself, she's thirsty for any mentions of where her mum was from and what her life might have been like before she came to America.
Yeah. And I think as well with the Dan as well, he kind of made her more curious, and they spoke about coming home as well. So I think that was a good kind of dynamic for them to have as well. That, you know, while they hadn't a shared experience of Wexford, there was a connection between them that they were able to, and he made her more curious as well, I think, about Ireland in general, which obviously set in a train of events in process.
Well, because there are reasons why B has never been to Ireland, which we find out as the story progresses. And there are reasons why she was never encouraged to go to Ireland. But when she meets Dan, this Irish man, and he's kind of a little bit incredulous, like, why haven't you been to Wexford to see where your man is from? Why haven't you gone to meet some of your Wexford family? There must be someone there. And he's kind of saying, well, look, I'll bring you. And he does open a lot of doors for her that had been kind of closed before. He nudges them open. So it was kind of interesting. So he has a lot of roles, actually, Dan does. he's definitely, he's a great character in that he gives strength at times where strength is needed. Like, he's a strong man, and while there's a bit of a mystery because you don't know through the story, you don't know what is happening with Bea and Dan, and there's a lot of unanswered questions until you get to the end. But he was a lovely character to write, and I enjoyed writing his character a lot, actually. Yeah, he was great.
He was fun as well. Even the randomness of helping people in the subway, and it's a real Irish thing to do, whereas they'd step over you, like possibly other big people. It's a real, like, someone fell and I went to go help him, and I got talking to some guy on the subway. He waves at me now every day. I think it's the friendliness of the Irish as well.
But again, they kind of all came from that research trip I did, because we were riding the subway out to Brooklyn, and myself and my husband, and that guy that I described that Dan meets on the subway, he was in the carriage with us, and I just had the best fun with him. And I know most people were looking at him like he was absolutely bonkers, but this guy was having the best time of his life, standing up, giving out about Donald Trump, giving out about the world and everything in America, and he was literally on this major rant. And we saw him several times on the subway because we were up and down quite a bit to Queens, and he was always there, but he always smiled. He was no threat to anyone. He was just one of those characters that New York have. There are so many wonderful characters, no matter where you go. What I love about New York is you can walk down Fifth Avenue and see a woman wearing a fur coat, with 3 toy dogs on a lead, with kind of really detailed diamond encrusted collars. And then you can see a guy in a subway who's, wearing what looks like a pair of pajamas and shouting out about Trump living on a house on the hill, which this guy was doing. It was kind of funny. But then Shane Cookman, who is actually the manager of the Fitzpatrick Hotel where I stayed when we were doing our research, and he had told me that when he first moved to New York, and this was his story, he was saying that he was there a good year, I think it was. And then one day he was walking up the subway and he saw someone had fallen, a bit like the one I described in the book, and he walked on by. And it was only when he walked on by, he stopped and he went, did I just walk by someone who was in trouble, who had fallen? And he turned around and he helped. Of course he did, because he's just this gorgeous man. He's lovely. But he turned around and he helped. But he said it was then he went, oh, hang on here now. I need to be careful, because New York is a different speed than Ireland, and things do move faster, and people don't tend to get involved in each other's business that they don't know, He kind of thought to himself, I need to check myself here now and not let myself become too New York and lose my Irishness. So that's why I gave that to Shane. That story was kind of influenced by, I know I exaggerated it in the book. Dan ends up going for pints with the guy and everything, but like, it was exaggerated. But it came from a story, a true story.
Okay. And Dan as well and Bea, they also bond over the fact that both their mothers have died, even though Dan's was obviously in different circumstances and much later in his life. Again, I presume that was a conscious decision on your behalf as well to give that bond.
Yeah, I don't know if you kind of noticed this, but I do know myself that in my own relationships, things tie us together, don't they? And I think that if you can find a common bond like that, like, it can immediately just draw you to them. And when they meet on New Year's Eve, it's a very busy night and it's a crazy night. Yeah. But they kind of recognize, I think New Year's Eve for me, I wanted to set their first meeting on that night in particular, because if you've lost anybody, or if you're sad for any reason, it's a night that will exaggerate that sadness, increase whatever pain you're going through. It will pierce it and make it harder. So I just thought it would be really interesting to have them meet on that night. And then, of course, their common pain about the loss of a parent, they can recognize that in each other. They don't even need to describe it. And there's quite a quiet moment for the two of them whereby at midnight, that Bea is very upset thinking about her mum, and he just knows because he's feeling the same about his own. And it's a lovely moment, really. There wasn't need for much words, really. And I think that that's why it was important for me that it was both their mothers that they'd lost, because it brought them closer together. And I wanted for the timeline, I knew that for their relationship, I wanted it to move quite fastly. There's bad grammar. I wanted it to move fast, even, not fastly. I don't know what that word was, but anyway, I wanted it to move quickly. And so I gave them that to bond over, because it just moved it along, I think.
Yeah, it intensified things very quickly for them, I think. I actually loved the concept. I think it was Bee's grand that had said it to her, that whatever you're doing or feeling at midnight, that's what you get for your year. So like, and I mean, I thought that was a lovely but scary notion. Like if you're in the floods of tears at midnight for sad reasons. But I thought it was just a lovely theme that continued on and continued in the, you know, both years for her, you know, with the letters and different things like that. I thought it was lovely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I kind of, you know, I don't know, you've probably heard this one, but I know my gran used to say to me that, you know, get that cross look off your face if the wind turns.
If the wind changes.
Yeah, the wind changes. So that was one. And so I just kind of twisted that a bit, and I made up that thing about New Year's Eve because it was just to add a little bit of humour, because of course Bea and Katrina and Stephanie then kind of jokes that when they were kind of young adults growing up, they used to borrow this line, and they used to say, well, we have to snog a guy at midnight on New Year's Eve.
Yes.
We snog a men all year round. And it just gave me a nice line to write, a bit of humour as well. But it was, I think New Year's Eve was actually quite important, actually, to the story. While it's not a story set at Christmas, it definitely, some big moments in Bee's life that set the story in motion. The first New Year's Eve, she meets Dan.
Yes.
Second, as you said, she receives this letter. It's a time capsule letter, and that arrives from her younger self. And basically a project when she was a kid, when she was 10 years old, her teacher asked all the students to write a letter to their future selves that would be sent out in the year 2020. And so when she receives this letter, she's reading all of the musings of her 10-year-old self, thinking about what her life might be like. And then, of course, it makes her ask some questions, because she's going to herself, okay, this is what I thought my life would look like. But it doesn't look like that at all. Why doesn't it? And then that in turn sends her on this path to find out more about her Irish heritage, about her mother's family in particular. And actually that letter idea came from an article I wrote. It was a few years ago. I don't know if you know The Big Issue, you know, the magazine. The
yes.
Big Issue. So they have a regular feature that they do where they ask people to write letters to their younger selves, to their 16-year-old younger self. So I did that I did that around one of my books has been published, and they asked me to do it. And I did it, and it was just a really fun exercise to do. And I took it seriously. Like, I really did. I looked at it, I thought, what would I say to my younger self? And one of the first things I would say, I don't smoke anymore. I haven't smoked in decades, but I did smoke when I was young, in my 20s. And one of the first things I say in this letter to my younger self is, you know, don't smoke. It doesn't make you look cool, and it's really hard to give up. And that line is in this letter, because when I saw that, I thought, God, wouldn't that be interesting? Imagine if you could say that to your younger self, and that's where that idea of that part of the book kind of happens. And because Bee's younger self has said in this letter, you know, I'll never smoke. And then Bea is there like, oh, well, that didn't really work out for me.
Yeah.
And it's one of the questions that she asks herself in the book. So, yeah. So The Big Issue, they helped me think of that part. That was
that one. And it was a lovely idea, actually, as well. And I think everyone, like you say, would like to go and tell their younger self something, you know, and then sometimes if you think about it, then you're thinking, if you changed what you did when you were 16, would you be where you are now? And if you're happy with where you are, changing your, you know, if you change things dramatically, do you alter the course of your life, you know, and you take a different path, like?
Yeah, and because I think sometimes you have to have experienced, exactly as you said, you've got to experience life to get where you are. And like we sometimes, Roger and I, my husband and I, we met each other a bit older, you know, so I didn't meet him until I was 35. And he will often say that he wished he knew me when I was younger. He would have loved us to have had, you know, another 20 years before we met.
Yes.
So actually in that letter in The Big Issue, I did say, you know, take a spin out to Clontarf and look up a young guy called Roger and persuade him that he needs to go out with you. But as we kind of talked about that too, that both of us maybe needed to have gone through the lives that we lived before we met, because then when we met each other, we were ready for each other. Like, we were so ready to settle down and start a family together, because we'd kind of both done lots of other stuff on our own, and it was the right time for us. So maybe if we had met when I was 18, when I first went to Dublin, maybe we wouldn't have lasted, or maybe we wouldn't have, recognized whatever it was we recognized in each other. I don't know. So it's hard to know. It's hard to...
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think you have to... Sorry.
You go ahead. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. I think you have to, like, by and large, the smoking thing, fine, or, drink less, drink more, have more crack. But I think to change the course dramatically will not leave you where you want to be now, or not bring you to where you want to be now. I know there's the what's for you won't pass you and all that, but if you were making dramatic changes at 16, I just think it changes things further down the line.
Absolutely. And even down to, I didn't start writing. Well, I take that back. I've been writing my whole life. I've been writing ever since I was a kid. But I didn't, start looking for this as a career until I was 40, actually. So 10 years, I would turn 50 in January, so 10 years ago. But again, had I have written the books, would I have been able to write the books I've written now 20 years ago, 30 years ago? Because I probably needed my life experience, the type of books that I write, because they're emotionally deep books. They're quite... there's a lot of big themes in them and big issues, but I probably needed to experience life and to understand those things before I could tackle them properly. So, I think that you can't really go back, can you? You've just got to keep putting one foot in front of the other. And
definitely, I think that's the only way to go forward, really. I think as well, just was wondering if the course of the book had changed as you were writing it, or did you have this is the way I wanted to go, and then your final page was the way you expected it to go, or did it change as you were, and it kind of evolve as you were writing?
Yeah, there are, without saying what they are, but there are several twists or reveals in this story. It's definitely got the most twists of any book that I've written. And there are quite a few little red herrings, if you like, along the way. So what you think might be happening is not happening. And then when you think you've had a reveal, that's not the last reveal. There's several more to come. So almost right to the last page, there's a little twist coming. And I know that in the main, like every reader who's gotten in touch has said to me they've been surprised. Someone said, I had an idea this was going to happen, but I had no clue about that. And the thing is that when I was writing it, actually, that a couple of those happened just as I was writing it. They only kind of whispered their truths to me as I was going along. So the story did change from the first, like initially I was going to set it, as I said earlier, in London, and that's not going to work. So it became New York. It was always going to be Kilmore, but then it became New York. But definitely the characters themselves changed. And it was only as I was writing B, that really her story. And there's a fairly big twist with her at the end, and I can say no more on that.
Definitely.
Yeah,
an emotional roller coaster.
Emotional twist, but that didn't happen until halfway through. It was I remember actually there's a place called Tyrone Guthrie. I don't know if you know it. It's the writing retreat.
The writing retreat, yes.
And it's stunning. Like literally one of my favorite places to go to when I can. And I just think there's creative magic in the air there. And when I go there, I always seem to write some of my best words. And I wrote part of this book up there. I started it up there, and most of my novels have had some part of them in Tyrone Guthrie. But while I was there and I was writing this book, and I was writing a lot of these scenes, and something wasn't working for me. And I can't say what, because I don't want to ruin a spoiler.
Yes.
It wasn't working for me. And I was kind of going, it doesn't feel right. It doesn't feel like a Carmel Harrington authentic kind of book. It feels like I'm trying to push something, and like square plug, round hole, and all the rest. So, and then it was just like, boom, it just hit me what I needed to do. And I rang my agent, actually, who's over in London Rowan, and I rang her and I told her, I said, look, I've got this fairly extreme idea. What do you think? And she said, tell nobody. It's brilliant. But she said, you could tell nobody. Do not say a word to anyone. Let's just surprise everyone. And so when I finished the book and sent it into my editor in HarperCollins, because that's who I'm published with, and so I hadn't mentioned to her about this last reveal in the book, if you like. So I was kind of really, really waiting on tenterhooks for her to come back and say whether she loved it or didn't. Thankfully, she loved it, so all is good. But Yeah, so a lot of those, and I think it's the same. Actually, I've already finished next year's book, and it was the same thing. There's a twist at the end as well, and I only thought of it as I was writing. It's like literally I was on the page, and I wasn't planning a twist on that page, and as I was writing, I went, "Oh God, this is so good!" I'll write it down. It just happens.
And have you got a name for that new one yet, or is it still unnamed? Or
no, not yet. It will be same time next year, so it will be out kind of the end of May next year. What I can tell you is it's set between New Zealand and Dublin this time. So it's not Wexford here. I think you might get a mention somewhere, but no, it's not Wexford this time. So it's Dublin. It's actually North County Dublin, which is where I worked with Aer Lingus for years. So I always lived. I know that neck of the woods. So it's Malahide, somewhere I know well. And New Zealand, yeah. So kind of two very, very different locations, but we'll see. So I've just done structural edits for that, which are kind of like the big overview edits. And then I'll do copy edits next and get it shipped up and ready so that it's ready for a cover and a title, which will happen. I would imagine over the next few weeks, we'll start getting those kind of things.
Okay.
But nothing yet on the title.
So quite a few of your books have dual locations and, parallel stories. Is that something conscious that you make a decision on, or is it just it's just the way that the story emerges in your head as you're kind of imagining it?
Yeah, the later books seem to have more of that. I mean, I travelled a huge amount. I just mentioned Aer Lingus, and because of them, I took full advantage of the staff travel, and I was forever there. Like I was, every time I wasn't working, I was hopping on a flight somewhere. And, I think probably that was why I actually didn't settle down until I was a little bit older. And it was because I was traveling. I was always on the go and exploring. And that wanderlust was something that was a huge part of me. So that's in the books for sure. I think the first one my first three are set in Ireland and fully in Ireland, and that's it. And I don't think I think the second one brings you to London and that's it for like one day, but like they're Irish. But the Things I Should Have Told You, which was my fourth one, and I wrote that and I decided to write about a family traveling around Europe in a camper. And that was a joy. I just enjoyed the process so much. It was so lovely and escapist as a writer to write about a lot of the places that I loved to visit and had been to in my 20s. And then it kind of stayed. And then the next one then was The Woman at 72 Derry Lane. That one is partially set in Thailand. And again, some big scenes over there. And the story just happened that way. I think it wasn't that I kind of thought to myself, I want to write a book that's set in Thailand. It was just that I wanted to write about something that happens in Thailand. And it's just an event I wanted to write about. And that's just so where it happened. And then, I think they all have it. A Thousand Roads Home is Ireland again, though. That brings us back to Ireland. But My Pear-Shaped Life, last year's book, that's a road trip from Kansas to Las Vegas, going through Utah and everything. So that was another big destination book too. So I do enjoy bringing people. I think it's nice as a read. I hope maybe you can tell me this now, but I think is it nice to escape your world a bit? And I'd like to bring people on a journey. You don't need a passport; you just need your book, and that's it. And I do think as well that the parallel stories as well is also good, because I suppose you can it's more, you get the two stories, so you're not focusing the entirety of the book on, a couple of central characters. Well, there is obviously, but there are different timelines and different decades and different issues and different families as well. So I think that's nice. Sometimes, well, especially when I was younger, I used to do it, skip to the end to see what was after happening by the end. Bold.
Yes, I know, but I used to do it. But I think when you have parallel stories, you can't really do that as much because it's not always wrapped up neatly in a bow, and if you skip to the end, you miss quite a chunk in the middle that you still have to go back to. Now, I used to read the book still, but I sometimes, if I got, very into it, I just I'll just see how this ends. And it was easier in a book, because now I read on the Kindle quite a lot. So, but in an actual book, you could easily just kind of go, I'll just have a quick look at the last few pages, which I know is forbidden, but I used to do it quite a lot.
I've done it too. We've all done it. I think we've all had a little sneaky
yeah.
But it is a little bit trickier, I think, when you've got dual timelines. And there is not actually, next year's one isn't, there are some flashbacks, but it's not dual timeline. It's all kind of pretty set over the last 3 or 4 years. But the one that I've started to write, which will be for 2023, is going to start in 1920. So we're going, it's going to be
way back.
Yeah, so it's still going to be a contemporary novel. It's, you know, it's going to be a Carmel Harrington read in the sense that it will be primarily a story told in the now, but a good third of the book will happen from the 20s to the 40s. Because I wanted to, it's a multi-generational family saga, and I wanted to go back. Something that happens in the 20s plays a part in what happens in the now. So I go right back, and it's just a period of Irish history that I'm really interested in. I always enjoyed. I'm a history buff, and I love like that whole time of the Irish Civil War, and then even Ireland's part in World War II. And you know, it's just an area of time that I really enjoy. So I've decided to explore that for the first time in more detail. So it's not a historical novel. It's not. But the lessons learned from people in the past are going to help the people in the now. If you like.
Okay. And just in relation to the Moon over Kilmore Quay, while it ends again around New Year's Eve, like essentially the book finishes in March 2020. Was that a COVID cut-off point? Is that why you went with that rather than, like, I know there is the New Year's Eve element of it, but essentially it ends in March 2020.
It was a deliberate decision. It was such a tricky one to think about, and I discussed it with the editor in HarperCollins a lot, because we were kind of thinking, when I was writing this book, bearing in mind we were I was writing this right at the beginning of the first lockdown, so it was kind of, you know, March 2020 when I was writing, really around then. We really didn't know what the world was going to look like when the book came out. So we knew the book was coming out in May 21, but like we're kind of thinking, like, what will it look like? Will everything be over? Will we be allowed? So I didn't want to predict what the future might look like in case I got it wrong, and pretty much aware that things were changing at such a rapid rate. And then the other thing was as well, then we were kind of going like, will people want to read about lockdown? So we just couldn't guess. And in the end, I thought, you know, my head hurts. My head hurts thinking about it. So I'm going to just cut it off at a moment. So I reference COVID, like it's not ignored.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
But it's kind of referenced. And so you kind of, it talks about at the end, as you said, you know, the fact that the world has stood still for the past year, and they reference that. But that's really it. I haven't really kind of gone any further. But I've had to, the book that I've just written, I've had to mention it because it's set in 2023. So I'm kind of guessing what the world's going to look like next year, and hoping that I'm right. I'm hoping that we're allowed traveling, because my characters are flying to New Zealand. So I hope that they are.
Okay.
Nothing is stopping them. But we can always make a few changes on the last minute edits if we have to. But I've had to mention COVID, and I've had to include it. What I haven't done is I haven't talked about it in any great detail. It's referred to, but I'm not talking about, you know, hospital visits or PCOS, or, you know, I'm trying to keep
like in the same way you'd mention an earthquake or some kind of seismic event in an area, you know, it's just mentioned as in it's there, and we move on. Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
And there are other novels that are dealing with it and dealing with it amazingly well, you know, and I just decided that in the case of mine, there was so much drama in the story. Like, I mean, so much drama in this next one that I've just written, that I figured that we didn't need any more drama from COVID. So I've left it.
It's quite difficult to write about it as well, you know, because everyone knows it, but everyone's experience of it is different. So it would be hard to incorporate it into a book.
This is it. And I agree. I think that's the danger, really, isn't it, really, for anything like that? We all have shared this big common experience, but we don't necessarily have had the same experience, you know. You know, my mother always says kind of about myself and my brother and two sisters, we grew up in the same house, but we all grew up very different. You know, we're all very different adults, even though we grew up doing the same things together. And it's the same thing, I think, with COVID, that you may react to the same situation very differently to me, and we all react in different ways. Yeah, so I've dealt with it, I hope, in a sympathetic way that doesn't offend nor upset anyone, but is accurate too, I hope.
And just maybe one final thing there, what has the reaction been from the people of Kilmore to the Moon over Kilmore Quay? Because obviously it's under and it's very much Kilmore Quay, with the exception of Nellie's. It is Kilmore Quay to a T. Like the Salty is referenced, Keogh's is referenced, all the different landmarks are there. So how have people reacted to it?
It's been lovely. It's been absolutely gorgeous from the moment we announced the title. And because there were two titles that were bandied around. The other was The Moon over Innisfree, because the song The Isle of Innisfree plays a very important part. Actually, Irish music full stop plays a part in this book, because it was something that as a kid growing up, Irish songs are definitely a nostalgic note and pull to home. And I know that I think every Irish immigrant has a favourite Irish song, and that is the song that gets them every time. And The Isle of Innisfree is mine. And my aunt lives in Australia, my godmother, and she makes me sing it for her when she comes home, and it always makes her cry, but she enjoys the cry because it's like, it's a cathartic cry. So
cathartic.
So The Isle of Innisfree is mine. My dad's is Spancel Hill. Everyone has a song. And I decided that Theo Connor's house in Brooklyn, where she was brought up, would be called Innisfree. And there is a lovely scene in Kilmore Quay, and there's also a scene in Innisfree in Brooklyn whereby the moon is shining. And for Lucy, it's Lucy Murner in 1992. She's leaving Ireland for Brooklyn, and before she goes, I wrote this scene, and it really is a little love letter to Kilmore Quay, really. And she's walking through Kilmore Quay saying goodbye to everything before she gets on the flight the next day. And there's a full moon, and she's looking at the boats bobbing up and down in the harbour, and she's thinking about the fact that the next time she looks at a full moon, she will be across the sea over in New York. And then in the now, then Bea has a scene where she's standing in her back garden in Brooklyn, in Innisfree, the house, and she's looking up at the full moon, and she's thinking about things. I can't say what, but she's thinking about things, important things. She's thinking about. And so when we were talking about titles, it could have been The Moon over Innisfree or The Moon over Kilmore Quay, and I wanted it to be Kilmore Quay. And so I just really pushed for it, and my editor and my agent loved it, and we all went for it. So the response to the name was just gorgeous, and everybody who's read it, a lot of people from Kilmore Quay and Wexford have read it. And the other thing, people have messaged me who have visited Kilmore Quay and had the chips from the Salty Chipper, and that just love the place. They're not from Wexford. They just have had great holidays there. I've had messages from all over the world, actually. A lot of Americans. It's very popular with the Americans when they come home to Ireland. And yeah, I'm so pleased that people have recognised the location and have enjoyed how I've described Ireland. And equally then, for those that moved to America, I've had so many messages from people who went out on the Morrison visas and the Donnelly visas in the 90s and the 80s, and who worked over in America, and recognise every location in the book, as you mentioned, except for Nellie's in Kilmore, are real, both in America and in Wexford in Ireland. They're all real places. So yeah, it's been great. I'm delighted that people have liked that.
And we say, I know you have the book written, and then the next one is on, you have another one for 2023, is it?
One a year.
Have you started that?
Kind of. I'm going to get cracking now. The kids are back to school. I'm working hard at it this month. And I have my schedule. The great thing is I'm at this now 10 years. And so I kind of know how it works. And I try to take a month off in the summer and a month off at Christmas for kid-related reasons. And other than that, I write every day. And I'm always kind of at my desk writing for at least a couple of hours. If I don't write every day, Esther, I lose my momentum. And so in order to kind of really carry the characters with me, to understand them, and for them to whisper their truths, a bit like I was saying to you about Bea, that she kind of revealed a twist to Bea as I was writing the story. For that to happen, I need to really be intimate with my characters and know them really well. And so I write every day for that purpose. I'm at the very early stages of this new one. And even the character names, they're feeling odd to me. So I haven't got to the point where the characters are my family, really. But when that happens, it's great. The book that I've just finished, actually next year's book, that's the way that is now. All of those characters, Rachel is the main character in that, actually. And everything about Rachel is very much, you know, I kind of know her so well. She feels like she's a sister to me, really, you know.
Okay.
But it's early doors on the one for 2023, and you know, soon it's like a little I'm like a hamster in a wheel. Like, keep on going. But as soon as one is finished, and then so I'm constant. It's one a year, so it's not that much, but you're always working on something. You know what I mean? Always working.
That was so enjoyable, Carmel and Esther. A great insight into how locations are selected and characters are developed. We have many more events for you between now and Sunday evening. Next up, we have Billy O'Callaghan and Fiona Ennis with Dr. Richard Hayes, and they'll be exploring what matters in a short story. You can book that now on rightbythesea.ie. Once again, a big thank you to Carmel Harrington and Esther Hayden. We really enjoyed that one.